Pathetic boy. You never had a head for success. My dad used to say. Those words echo in my mind more than I care to admit, as if he stamped them into my bones. Funny how things turn out, though. Not long after, I was trending everywhere. My name on finance blogs, my photos splashed across LinkedIn feeds. Youngest male founder on Wall Street, they said. I remember the look on everyone's faces at the family barbecue that summer, all conversation dying when I pulled up in my Ferrari. Even my little cousin, who once idolized my dad's work boots, just stared at the car, wide-eyed. That's me, Joshua Langford, 23, the kid who built a fintech startup from nothing in a muggy Charleston apartment. Back home, success wasn't a word you ever said out loud. It was something you measured by the dirt under your nails and the sunburn on your neck. Something you showed quietly in a paid-off truck or a new shed for your tools. My dad, Nathan. He spent 3 decades building his landscaping business, turning one battered F-150 into a fleet of 20, his name painted bold on every driver's door. He measured a man's worth by how much sweat he left behind in the field, how callous his hands got by Friday. To him, choosing finance over the family company was a betrayal of everything he'd tried to teach me. That disappointment in his eyes stung more than any splinter or blister ever did. For 3 years, I obsessed over an algorithm to outthink the big firms, to open up the world of investing to people like my parents who'd never trust a banker. Nights, weekends, holidays, I was hunched over my laptop, code blur on the screen, while everyone else was out living. Sometimes, Dad would walk by my room, pause in the doorway, shake his head with a sigh, and mutter about boys wasting time on computers. Every jab landed right under my ribs, fueling me to stay up another hour, to rewrite another line, just to prove him wrong. I didn't want his approval so much as I wanted to show him there was more than one way to make something of yourself. Last month, I overheard him talking to my uncle at dinner. Josh will be back mowing lawns by summer, he said, laughter in his voice. That boy couldn't sell water in a desert. I just kept eating, staring down at my plate, then helped Mom load the dishwasher. When I got back to my apartment that night, I closed the biggest deal of my life, alone except for the hum of my fridge and the city lights blinking through the blinds. I grew up watching Dad work miracles, stretching a season's profits just far enough to buy a new mower, talking banks into giving him one more loan. Every summer since I was 12, I hauled mulch, cut grass, planted trees, sweat soaking through my shirt in the Carolina heat. He taught me hard work, but somewhere along the way, he started to believe that hard work only counted if it left your hands raw and your back aching. That's what he respected, because that's all he ever knew. When I got into USC's business program, he barely reacted. College boys think they know everything. Wait till they meet the real world, he said, handing me a crumpled 20 like it was some kind of talisman. That was his way of sending me off. No pep talks or hugs, just a warning and a bill to buy a sandwich. My mom, Denise, was different. She pressed $500 into my hand, money she'd scraped together from her teaching job, week by week. Go make something that makes you happy, she whispered, her voice trembling. She never would have said it in front of Dad. She knew how much I needed to hear it, how much I needed someone in my corner. Sophomore year, I built an algorithm that caught my professor's eye. This could change how regular people invest, he told me, almost in awe. I dropped out the next semester to chase the idea for real. When I called home, Mom cried so hard I could barely understand her. Dad just hung up, the silence heavier than anything he could have said. For 2 years, I lived off ramen and black coffee, squeezed into a tiny apartment with 2 roommates. Every venture capitalist shot me down. Too young, not enough experience. Come back when you failed at something first. I printed out each rejection email and taped them to my wall, not for inspiration, but as a list of every person who didn't believe in me, every gatekeeper who said no. They built a wallpaper doubt that made me grit my teeth and keep coding. Thomas, my old roommate from college, stuck with me through all of it. He brought me food when I forgot to eat, proofread my pitches, and listened to me ramble about risk assessment models at 3 a.m. You're the smartest person I know, he'd say, clapping me on the back. Just remember us little people when you're rich. I laughed, but I think he believed it before I did. Meanwhile, Dad's comment got sharper, more public. At Thanksgiving, my son, still figuring things out. At Christmas, maybe you should apply for a manager job at the company, since that computer thing isn't working. Anytime I tried to explain my work, he'd change the subject, point out a neighbor's new fescue, interrupt me to ask Thomas if he wanted another beer. Not once did he ask to see what I was building or why I cared so much about it. On my 23rd birthday, I got an email from Blackwater Capital, one of the biggest hedge funds on the East Coast. They wanted to license my tech exclusively for $14 million. I stood in my kitchen reading that email 17 times, heart pounding, coffee going cold in my hand. I called Thomas first. He screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Then I called Mom. She cried again, this time with relief and pride tangled together. I didn't call Dad. I couldn't. 3 days later, I signed the contracts in New York. The Blackwater execs took me to a restaurant where the menu didn't even bother with prices, where the waiters wore suits sharper than anything in my closet. The CEO, Patricia Donovan, raised her glass and said, "To the future of finance." Everyone toasted. I smiled for the cameras, but inside, all I could hear was my father's voice. Pathetic boy, you never had a head for success. That night, alone in my hotel room, my cousin Evan texted. He's the only one in the family who ever cared about what I was building. Just saw the Wall Street Journal article. Holy Josh, you're famous. I opened my laptop. There it was. My face, my company, my whole improbable story splashed across the finance news. 23-year-old dropout lands, 8-figure deal with Wall Street giant. They kept repeating my age like it was the only thing that mattered, like I was still a kid playing at being a grown-up. I closed the laptop and stared out at the New York skyline, lights flickering in the distance. I didn't feel anger or hurt, not anymore. Just a strange, perfect clarity, like the fog finally lifting off the harbor back home after a long, stormy night. I realized then that none of the headlines, none of the money, none of the doubters could define what success truly meant for me. It wasn't about the Ferrari or the deal or the viral posts. It was about the stubborn belief that I could build something different, something lasting, even if no one else could see it yet. I thought about Mom's quiet hope, Thomas's faith, and even Dad's stubborn pride, twisted as it was. I knew exactly what came next. I wasn't done proving people wrong. But more than that, I was finally ready to start proving myself right. The next morning, I wandered into the Ferrari dealership wearing jeans and a T-shirt that still smelled faintly of last night's takeout. The showroom gleamed with polished metal and immaculate glass. Ferraris everywhere, each one a fantasy. The sales guy barely glanced up from his phone, his gaze sliding over me like I was invisible. It wasn't until I casually mentioned the figure I was prepared to spend that his entire demeanor shifted. Suddenly, I was the only person in the room. 2 hours later, after paperwork and the kind of small talk that feels more like a negotiation than a conversation, I was behind the wheel of a red Ferrari Roma. The truth was, I'd never hung posters of cars on my childhood bedroom wall. Never fantasized about the prancing horse logo. The car wasn't about desire or even celebration. I just wanted to make a statement, one so loud and undeniable that no one could twist it into something else, so clear that it would cut to the static of assumptions and half-truths that always seemed to surround me. I didn't call ahead before heading home to Charleston. I knew exactly what I'd find. Dad's enormous Memorial Day barbecue in full swing. The annual spectacle where he gathered everyone he could, clients, employees, distant cousins tracked down through family grapevines, ostensibly to honor the holiday, but in reality to stage his own brand theater. He relished the chance to play host, to show off his achievements, to let everyone see what he built brick by brick. I timed my arrival for 2 o'clock sharp, knowing the backyard would be at peak capacity. Every folding chair occupied, the grill smoking, laughter rising above the hum of conversation. As I turned into the driveway, the Ferrari's engine snarled, the sound slicing through the afternoon hushed long before the car itself appeared. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. I parked right beside Dad's battered old pickup, the one he always described as the backbone of the business, the real workhorse. I paused, hand on the door. I told myself this wasn't about revenge or proving a point, but the truth was messier than that. I just wanted, for once, to be seen, not as a disappointment, not as a curiosity, but as my own man. I walked into the backyard with nothing but my car keys. A hush fell over the crowd, as if the remote had hit mute on their lives. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. Dad stood by the grill, spatula raised, his expression somewhere between shock and calculation. "Sorry I'm late," I said, forcing a casualness I didn't feel as I crossed the grass. Traffic from New York was brutal. Dad recovered quickly, slipping into persona he wore for clients. The easy charm, the too bright smile. "Well, look who finally decided to join us," he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder with just enough force to sting. "Whose car did you borrow for that entrance, son?" The question was a punchline. Laughter rippled through the crowd, some of it genuine, some of it nervous. "I didn't borrow it," I said, my voice steady even as my heart hammered in my chest. "It's mine. I bought it yesterday." He grinned, shooting a glance at Uncle Frank. "And I'll be buying a private jet next week." More laughter, louder this time, the crowd relieved to be let off the hook. Without a word, I pulled the title out of my back pocket and handed it to him, the paper a little crumpled from being folded and unfolded all morning. He stared at it, his face shifting as the reality dawned. For a split second, something raw flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or even pride, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He handed the title back, shrugging. "Must be nice, having rich friends who trust you with their toys," he said, turning back to the grill as if the matter were settled. "Grab a plate. Your mother made her famous potato salad." All afternoon, I circled him, trying to carve out a moment for a real conversation. Each time I tried, he sidestepped with the practiced ease of someone who spent a lifetime avoiding uncomfortable truths. If I brought up the company, he changed the subject to the yard, the new landscaping he was planning, or the neighbor's fence that needed repair. When I mentioned the technology, the algorithms, the team I was building, he barely let me finish a sentence before making an excuse to grab a drink or tend to the grill. Even when his business partner asked about the Wall Street Journal article that had run last week, Dad cut him before I could say a word. "Don't believe everything you read, Pete," he said, waving his hand dismissively. Journalists love to exaggerate. As the sun dipped below the trees and the crowd began to thin, I found Dad in his office. The lights dim, paperwork spread across the desk like a barricade. He looked up briefly as I entered, then returned to his spreadsheets. "Dad, we need to talk about what's going on with my company," I said, my voice low but insistent. He didn't look up. "There's nothing to talk about. You got lucky with some computer thing. Don't let it go to your head." $14 million isn't luck," I replied, my hands trembling just enough for me to notice. He finally met my eyes, his own hard and tired. "You know what built his family?" He jabbed a finger at a faded photo on the wall. Him at 20, grinning beside his first truck, sweat-soaked and proud. 40 years busting my ass. That's what, not sitting behind a screen pressing buttons. Not numbers on a page that could disappear tomorrow. "What I built is real," I said, and I meant it. The late nights, the risk, the vision no one else could see. It was as real as the calluses on his hands. He leaned across the desk, voice dropping. "Let me tell you something, Joshua. I've seen your type before. Flash in the pan. You'll burn through the money. Those Wall Street sharks will eat you alive. And then what? You'll come crawling back here, and I'll have to explain to everyone why my son, couldn't cut it in the real world." He looked away, jaw clenched. "That's not success. That's not how you build anything that lasts." I left without another word. There was nothing else to say. In the kitchen, my mom was quietly rinsing dishes, her movements slow and deliberate. She turned as I entered, drying her hands on a towel, eyes shining with unshed tears. "He's proud of you, Josh," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He doesn't know how to show it." I shook my head, frustration mixing with exhaustion. "No, Mom, he's not proud. He's threatened. He built his world with his own hands. And now he's afraid mine's going to swallow it up." The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was my cousin Evan. Uncle Nathan's telling everyone your deal fell through, that you lied about everything. He says you just rented that car to show off. People are talking, man. The words didn't make me angry. Instead, a cold certainty settled in my chest. I knew this was how it would go. Dad always needed control of the story, to make sense of things on his own terms. I stayed in Charleston for the next week, checking into a hotel downtown. I met with lawyers, financial advisors, members of the team I was assembling for the next stage of the company. Most days, I felt like I was moving through water. Everywhere I went, the background noise of rumors and whispers seemed to follow me. The story about Dad, about me, about the company changed depending on who was telling it, but the one constant was the doubt he planted. Thomas texted, "Your dad came by the apartment looking for you. Asked a lot of questions about where the money's going." My aunt called. "Nathan told everyone at church you're in some kind of trouble with those New York people. Is everything okay, sweetheart?" Even Patricia from Blackwater, a hard-nosed corporate attorney who'd never met my father, reached out, just checking in. Someone claiming to be your dad called our office, asking about our agreement. We didn't tell him anything, obviously. By Tuesday afternoon, the strain was wearing on me. I drove to my parents' house, timing my arrival for when I knew Dad would be out on a job site. My mom answered the door, her hands trembling as she poured coffee, the kitchen heavy with the silence of things left unsaid. "Mom, what's happening with Dad?" I asked, watching her closely. She sat across from me, cradling her mug, eyes fixed on a spot on the table. "He's worried about you." "That's all," she said, as if worry could explain everything. "Worried enough to tell people I'm a liar? Worried enough to call my business partners behind my back?" My voice cracked, the pain sharper than I expected. She looked down at her hands, twisting the ring on her finger. "You have to understand, Josh, your success, it scares him. He spent his whole life fighting for every inch, and now you've done something he can't understand. It's not you he doesn't believe in. It's himself. He's afraid he won't measure up to you, or that you'll leave him behind." For the first time, I saw the truth in her words. Dad wasn't just angry. He was lost, trying to protect the world he'd built, even if it meant tearing mine down in the process. And in that moment, I realized that being noticed, being seen, wasn't enough. What I wanted, what I needed, was something he might never be able to give. It shakes up everything he's built his life around. That's not my problem. "No," she said, quiet but certain, "but he's making it your problem." She paused, her eyes drifting to the window, as if searching for the right words in the drifting leaves. "There's more. The business is in trouble. Has been for a long time, longer than either of us wanted to admit. The new landscaping chains keep slashing their prices, rolling into town with fleets of gleaming trucks, undercutting everyone, swallowing up contracts that used to be our bread and butter. He can't keep up. Not with their scale, not with their discounts, not with their relentless drive to expand." That hit me harder than I thought it would. Why didn't he tell me? I asked, a mix of anger and sadness curling in my chest. "Pride," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of years spent watching him fight losing battles. "That's why he can't celebrate your success, either. If he admits your way worked, it means his way didn't. To him, acknowledging that is like pulling a thread that might unravel everything he's ever done. I left my mom with a promise. I'd fix things, somehow. But driving away, the streets blurring past my window, I realized this was bigger than pride. This was about fear. Fear that I'm a glimpse of a future that doesn't have room for men like him. Men who fix their own engines, who build businesses on handshakes and reputation, who never learn how to pitch to investors or navigate spreadsheets on a screen. For Dad, I was proof that the world had moved on, and he was being left behind. That night, unable to shake the conversation, I called Uncle Frank, Dad's younger brother and his business partner, since the days when they shared a single truck and a dream. We met at a bar downtown, the kind of place where old regulars nurse their drinks and watch the world change on TV screens above the bar. Frank nursed his beer, staring at the phone, before finally speaking. He remortgaged the house. 3 years ago, poured everything back into business. New trucks, equipment, trying to keep up with the big guys. It's not working. The words came out flat, but I could hear the defeat behind them. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my throat tight, not sure if I wanted to hear the answer. Frank finally looked up, his eyes tired, because he asked if I thought you'd invest your computer money in the business. He's going to ask you. He thinks maybe you'll save the company, keep it in the family. He's desperate, but he'd never admit it. I leaned back, the realization settling over me like a weight. So, he doesn't believe in my success, but he wants my money, wants me to prop up the old way. Even as he can't bring himself to acknowledge the new? He believes it, Frank said, sighing. He just can't say it out loud. Your father's a proud man. Built something from nothing with his hands and his grit. But the world changed, and he didn't. It's hard to watch everything you built slip away. On my way home, I drove past Dad's business. The old sign buzzed against the dusk, paint peeling, but still standing. The lights were still on inside. I parked across the street and watched him through the window, hunched over a pile of paperwork. Shoulders slumped, the years of struggle etched into his posture. For a second, I saw him not as my father, but as a man running out of options, holding on to the past as it faded into shadows of bigger, faster, more ruthless competitors. I realized his anger at me wasn't just about being jealous of my success. He needed someone to blame for his failure, someone to be the scapegoat for dreams crumbling. If my way was wrong, then his way wasn't failing. It was simply unappreciated by a world too blind to value real, honest work. The next morning, a text popped up from him. Need to discuss business opportunity. Dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. The message was formal, almost cold, like a business memo instead of father reaching out. I replied with one word, yes, but I didn't go to dinner. Instead, I spent the day making calls, determined to find a solution that didn't involve pouring good money after bad. First, Patricia at Blackwater. I need info on landscaping companies in Charleston. Who's buying, who's growing, who's hungry for expansion. Within hours, I had a list of the 3 biggest players, each one circling Dad's territory like sharks. By noon, I'd lined up meetings with 2 of them, both eager to talk about consolidation. Then I called a commercial real estate agent I knew from my own business circles. Looking for space for a tech incubator, I said, preferably in the old industrial district. Something with history, with bones, with the kind of character that echoes persistence. The next morning, I sat down with Harold Jenkins, owner of Greenscape Enterprises, the biggest landscaping company in the state, a man who'd built his empire by swallowing smaller outfits just like Dad's. He'd been eyeing Langford Landscaping for a while, waiting for the right moment. Prime service area, loyal customers. But Nathan won't return my calls, he admitted, a hint of frustration in his voice. What if I could change that? I asked, meeting his gaze. I wasn't just negotiating for dollars. I was negotiating for Dad's dignity, for the people who'd worked beside him for decades, for the sense that his life's work didn't just vanish. By evening, Greenscape sent me an offer in writing. $1.2 million, double what Dad's company was worth on paper, plus a 5-year contract for Dad as regional manager. His employees would all keep their jobs, no layoffs, no broken promises, plus better benefits. Something Dad could never afford on his own. I also signed a lease for a 15,000-square-foot warehouse, the new headquarters for my company. I was bringing my operation back to Charleston, not just out of nostalgia, but because I wanted to build something that lasted, something that honored where I came from even as it pointed to the future. The last piece fell into place when I hired Evan, fresh out of business school, as my COO. Are you serious? He said when I offered him the job. I've never run anything. Neither had I told him, remembering my own uncertain beginnings. But you believe in what we're building. That's what matters. We can learn the rest. 3 days after I skipped dinner with Dad, I still hadn't answered his increasingly frustrated messages. I could feel his anger through the words, the hurt buried underneath the bluster. Instead, I walked into his office, unannounced, with a folder in my hand. He looked up, anger burning on his face, but also something else, worry, exhaustion, the look of a man who sees the end coming and can't outrun it. So, you decided to grace me with your presence after standing me up. His words were sharp, but his voice wavered. I set the folder on his desk. This is more important than dinner. What is it? Your big investment in my company. His voice was mocking, but I heard the plea beneath it. No, it's an acquisition offer from Greenscape. They want to buy Langford Landscaping. My words hung in the air, heavy and final. He went pale, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. You went behind my back. I went ahead of you, I said, my voice steady. The business is failing, Dad. You know it, I know it. This offer keeps your legacy. Your people keep their jobs. You stay on as regional manager with profit sharing. You get to walk away with your head high, not broken. So that's your plan? Sweep in with your Wall Street connections and take over the business I built. His voice was shaking now, raw with the pain of letting go. I shook my head. The business you built is dying. This saves it. It's not about me taking over. It's about making sure everything you work for doesn't disappear. Your name still means something, Dad, but it won't if you let this go under. He stood up, hands trembling, eyes shining with a mix of fury and grief. Get out, he whispered. There's one more thing, I said, reaching into my jacket. I put a key on his desk. It was heavy, cold, a symbol of something larger than either of us. It's the new office. I'm moving my company back to Charleston. I want you to see what I'm building, to be part of it if you want. The world's changing, Dad, but maybe we can change with it together. He stared at the key, silent, caught between the past and a future he never imagined. For the first time, I saw not just my father, but a man at a crossroads, afraid, proud, but maybe, just maybe, willing to let someone else help carry the weight. What's this supposed to be? Dad's voice was gruff, but there was a flicker of curiosity beneath the suspicion. I placed a small object on his desk, a gleaming, unmistakable emblem. It's the key to my Ferrari. Call it a gift. He narrowed his eyes, as if searching for the real catch. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's an advance. I hesitated at the doorway. The old office felt smaller than I remembered, weighed down by 4 decades of ambition and sacrifice. The offer's good for 48 hours, I said, each word a challenge and a plea. After that, Greenscape goes to your competitors. Think about your employees, Dad. Think about Mom. My voice faltered on the last word, but I kept my back straight as I walked out. Behind me, there was silence, then the faint metallic clink of a key being picked up, a sound so subtle, yet heavy with meaning. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. He drove the car today. Didn't say a word, but he drove it. That was all she wrote. But the subtext was clear. He would consider my offer, maybe even reconsidering what both of us had come to believe about pride, about help, about family. By evening, Dad had made the call to Harold Jenkins at Greenscape. The conversation was short and businesslike, but by the following day, we had a deal in principle. It felt transactional, but beneath the numbers and paperwork, something personal was shifting. I watched from the sidelines as Dad signed away the business he'd built from nothing. The conference room was too large, the fluorescent lights too harsh, making him look smaller, diminished somehow. Still, as he stood to leave, the Ferrari key in his pocket, there was a set to his shoulders, a quiet dignity, maybe even relief. He was letting go, but on his own terms. 2 months later, I stood on a makeshift stage in a building that still smelled of fresh paint and ambition. 200 people filled the space. Employees old and new, local business owners, media, friends, family. Dad positioned himself in the back, arms folded, the observer rather than the center of attention. Today, we're launching Horizon Analytics. I began, my voice steady but heart pounding. Our goal is to make financial tech available to everyone, not just the big names on Wall Street. And we're doing it right here in Charleston, where tradition meets innovation. The applause was immediate, but I pressed on. We're also announcing our first local partnership. Horizon's investing $2 million in Greenscape Regional Holdings, the new parent company for several landscaping businesses, including what used to be Langford Landscaping. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. For many, it was the first they'd heard of this kind of merger, old school meeting new, not as adversaries, but as partners. Dad's had snapped up, his attention now fully captured. As part of this, we're launching a technology initiative to help traditional service businesses thrive in a digital world. And Nathan Langford will lead this project as Director of Traditional Industries. The applause this time was thunderous, a public acknowledgement of the value of experience and resilience. I looked at Dad for the first time that day, searching for something in his expression. Was it pride? Relief? I couldn't tell, but for once, the wall between us felt thinner. Nathan's built something that matters over 40 years. I continued. Knowledge you can't code. Experience you don't get in a classroom. By combining his expertise with our technology, we're not just trading old for new. We're building something sturdier, a bridge between past and future. After the speeches, while people mingled and celebrated, Dad finally approached. You planned this, he said, not quite accusing, more curious than anything. I plan to build something that matters, I replied. Everything else just fell into place. It was true. My motivations had shifted. This was no longer about proving myself to him or anyone else. It was about creating something bigger than either of us could have managed alone. He looked around at the energy, the possibilities, the employees who now felt part of something new. Your name's not on the building, he said, quiet but pointed. Neither was yours, I told him with a smile. But everyone knew who built it. For the first time in years, maybe since I was a kid, I saw something like respect in his eyes. Not the old approval I used to crave, but recognition. A craftsman acknowledging another, a builder seeing the value in the next generation's vision. He extended his hand. I took it, the handshake firm, a contract more binding than any legal document. The Ferrari stays with you, I said. Consider it a signing bonus. He almost smiled, almost. Sold it already. Bought myself a truck. The rest went into your company's stock. The admission was simple, but it meant everything. He was betting on me, on us. 6 months later, I sat in my office overlooking the Cooper River, the city stretching beyond the glass. On my desk was a framed article from the Charleston Business Journal. Local tech firm partners with traditional industries, 150 new jobs created. A tangible reminder of what we built together and apart. Dad and I still weren't close in the traditional sense. Old habits and wounds ran deep, but we'd found common ground in the work. Every week we grabbed lunch, discussing the traditional industries program. He'd started bringing in other business owners, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, men and women who, like him, had built their lives on grit and stubbornness, and who now faced a world changing faster than they could keep up. They don't need handouts, he told me during one of our lunches, gesturing with his coffee cup. They need tools that actually work for them. For the first time, I really listened, not as a son defending his choices, but as a partner eager to learn. He was right. Technology should empower, not replace. The Greenscape partnership exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Dad's know-how, paired with our tech, pushed the business into 3 states. Former employees became shareholders, enjoying better health care and a newfound sense of security. For many, it was the first time they'd had a real stake in the company's future. Mom finally retired from teaching and began to travel, something she'd always dreamed of but had never been able to afford. On one of our weekly calls, she laughed, telling me, "Your dad even took a cooking class with me in Italy. Can you believe it?" There was joy in her voice, a lightness I hadn't heard in years. My brother Thomas joined as marketing director, his creativity giving our brand a new voice. Evan, my old college friend, thrived as COO, streamlining operations and mentoring our growing team. We'd hired 30 recent graduates from local colleges, keeping talent in Charleston, giving a new generation of builders a place to start. As for me, I stopped chasing validation. I realized that success wasn't about a single deal or a glowing headline. It was about building something that would last, something that mattered to people, to the city, to my family. The $14 million deal I once thought would be the finish line, it was only the prologue to a far bigger story, one about legacy, reinvention, and the stubborn hope that we could bridge the gap between what was and what could be. That night, As I left the office, I paused by the wall where we'd hung our company values. I ran my fingers over the words, thinking of all the hands, old and young, that had helped bring them to life. In that quiet moment, I understood what we'd built wasn't just a company. It was a promise to everyone who dared to imagine something better, and the beginning of a story still being written. Down at the bottom, there was something new, a line that hadn't been there before. It was my dad's idea, actually, something he came up with during one of our long, late-night talks. Remember whose shoulders you stand on. I paused when I read it, feeling a mix of gratitude and humility. It was a quiet reminder that no matter how far I'd come, I hadn't gotten here alone. The lessons, the sacrifices, even the arguments, they'd all built the foundation I was standing on now. When I walked out to the parking lot that evening, I caught sight of my plain black sedan parked next to my dad's shiny new truck. The contrast made me smile. There was a time when having a flashier car mattered to me, when I thought outward success was the only thing that counted. Now, it seemed almost symbolic that we both chosen simpler vehicles. We didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore, least of all each other. The important things had already been said, and there was a sense of peace between us, a mutual understanding that didn't require words. Driving home along the waterfront, the city lights shimmering on the surface, I found myself reflecting on what success truly means. When I was younger, I was driven by a need to prove my dad wrong, to show him that my way was better, that I could surpass him on my own terms. It was all about competition and pride, about standing out and making a mark that was unmistakably my own. But somewhere along the way, things changed. I started to realize that success wasn't about outshining him or erasing his legacy. It was about taking what he'd given me, the values, the work ethic, even the stubbornness, and building on it in my own way. We weren't just following separate paths anymore. We were weaving a new one together with room enough for both of us. It took time and a lot of hard conversations. But eventually, I understood that my real victory wasn't in beating him or undoing what he'd built. Instead, it came from creating a future that honored both his past and my own ambitions, a space where his experience and my fresh ideas could coexist and strengthen each other. We managed to achieve something neither of us could have pulled off alone, a partnership that blended tradition with innovation, respect with independence. Now, when I think about winning, it doesn't feel like a solitary triumph. It feels like a shared accomplishment, a testament to what's possible when you stop trying to win against someone and start building something with them. In the end, the greatest success was learning to stand together, each of us supporting the other, grounded in where we came from and hopeful about where we're going. That's what real success looks like to me now, not conquering the past, but carrying it forward and making something new, together.